Welcome to the first My To-Do List app script tutorial video. The objective of this video is to introduce the basic Google Drive user to Google Apps Script and how to write and implement a script that automates a repetitive process in Google Spreadsheets. These videos are set up under the guiding principle that crafts like coding are learned best by mimicking. This is similar to how an apprentice learns a craft like brickwork, where teaching the student the names of the tools is far more effective once they've experienced using them firsthand. So this video is not intended to teach a specific application of AppScript as much as it is to provide the learner with the necessary experience prerequisite to writing his or her own custom functions. And it is my belief after a few short videos, this immersion process will have given you enough insight into the vocabulary and comfortability with the process of creating functional code to empower you to step out on your own. This video is paced slowly so that the user can follow along without having to pause very often. If you're a bit more ADD than that, there is a Cliff's Notes version of the video that will run quickly through the code, omitting the explanations. Let's begin. Make a copy of the sample to-do list provided in the description below this video. Then open it in a separate browser window such that you can see both the tutorial video and your own version at the same time. When you've done this, let's begin. We'll start by creating a new script file for our spreadsheet by clicking on the Tools menu and clicking Script Editor. A dialog box will appear. Click on the first option, Blank Project. Next, click on the name of the file at the top left and rename the script file Consolidate. Let's rename our function by highlighting My Function and typing Consolidate To-Do List. Notice my use of capital letters. This is a style convention called camel case and should become common practice for you. Next, we declare a few variables that tell the script which file and sheet to work on. Click to the right of the bracket and press Return to get the correct indentation. Now, we'll create the variable ss by typing var space ss space equals. Next, type Spreadsheet app, ensuring that the S and the A are capitalized. Follow this with a period, and notice an alphabetical list of options that appears. These are called methods. Arrow down to Get Active Spreadsheet and press Return. Follow this with a semicolon and press Return again. Follow this same procedure to create the variable sheet. Now type ss.getSheetByName. Within the parentheses, write the name of the sheet that you want the script file to access inside of double quotes. Make sure to be sensitive to case. For this example, the name of the sheet we want is Sheet 1. We now create a variable named range. Set this equal to sheet dot and begin typing getRange. Now arrow down to the option Get Range by String A1 Notation. Press Return. Now inside the parentheses, type A2 through A11 inside of double quotes. Click to the right of it, type a semicolon, and press return. Now create the variable range vals. Set this equal to range dot and begin to type get values. Arrow down to the option, press return. Now let's create a new array called final list by creating a variable called final list and setting it equal to new array. Ensure that array is capitalized and followed by empty parentheses and a semicolon. Now, let's create a for loop together. This will be a mechanism that goes one by one through our list of range vals. Please type the following piece of code for your for loop. Now press return twice and type a right curly brace. Click inside the blank space between the curly braces. Whatever we type here will occur every time the for loop runs. Let's get a better idea of how this for loop we just wrote works by using a tool that we'll end up using a lot down the road called logger. Type the word logger with a capital L. Begin to type .log and press return. Now, inside the parentheses, replace the highlighted word data with the variable we created earlier, I. Anything we put within the parentheses of logger.log will be printed to the script editor's logs, which can be viewed by pressing Command Return or clicking on View and clicking on Logs. Click the floppy disk or press Command S to save our script file. Now click the Run button. Since this is our first time running the script, we need to authorize this script to be able to manipulate our spreadsheet. So click Continue and then click Accept. Now that we've given our script file permission to operate, let's click Run again. Next, let's view our logs and take a moment to understand what's happening with our for loop here. The logger has logged 0 through 9 in increments of 1. This means that I started out as 0, and while it was less than 10, it incremented up in values of 1, and then stopped when I was no longer less than 10. Moving on, let's create a variable called instance. Let's have this variable represent the item within the range vals array that corresponds to the I value during that iteration of our for loop. In other words, during the first run of our loop, when I is 0, our variable instance will equal range vals 0. During the second loop, when I equals 1, then instance will equal range vals 1, and so on. Let's use our logger again to see this in action. Replace the I with the variable we created, instance. Now let's run the script again. Let's view the log. As you can see, the for loop we've created goes one by one through the contents of our variable named range vals. And each time it runs, the logger prints the item within the range vals array that corresponds with what the I variable is during that iteration of the for loop. Now we want to write some code that will skip the times when instance is blank. We can do this by writing an if statement. Let's create our if statement within the brackets of our for loop so that it will operate each time the loop runs. Let's write the following. If, in parentheses, instance is not equal to nothing. Press return twice and then type a right curly brace. Now let's take a moment to refer to our logger. Press Command Return. With our code the way it is now, our variable instance returns each value of our range vals array inside of its own pair of square brackets. In this condition, our if statement will not recognize our instance variable properly. So, to get the value inside of each of those pairs of brackets, we'll want our variable instance to be equal to range vals I 0 instead of just range vals I. Let's run the script again and view the logs to see the difference this 0 made. Observe how now, every time the variable instance is logged, it contains only the value. Now every time our for loop runs and our variable instance has a null or empty value, it will fail to meet the requirement of our if statement and will be skipped. Our next step is to write a piece of code that will add all non-empty values to a new array. Let's click inside of the curly braces of our if statement and create a new variable that will add our variable called instance back into its own set of square brackets. This step is necessary when it comes time to reinsert our data into our spreadsheet. So let's create a variable called instance block and make it instance with square brackets around it, like this. Now we want to add the values of our variable instance block to that empty array we made at the beginning called final list. To do this, we will use the method push by writing final list dot push and then within the parentheses write instance block. We are now finished with our for loop and we are almost done with our code. All that remains is to clear our spreadsheet range and repaste our new list, which contains no blank spaces, back into the position that it was in before. Create a new line under the right curly brace at the end of our for loop. We'll clear that range by typing range dot and beginning to type clear content, arrowing down and pressing return, adding a semicolon and pressing return again. Next, we will put our new list of values, the one without blank spaces, which is now held in the final list array, back into our spreadsheet. we define where to put the new values by typing range.offset, and then we type a 0 for row, a 0 for column, and then final list dot length for the number of rows. Then we instruct our script to add the values of our final list array back into that range we just defined by typing .setValues and then typing our variable final list within the parentheses. It's time to save the code and run it to see if it works. If it doesn't, it means that you haven't copied something down the same way that I've written it. Let's move on. Our last step is to automate this function so that it will operate every time an edit is made to our to-do list. Google Spreadsheets has included a default trigger function called onEdit that will run any time an edit is performed to our spreadsheet. Let's create a new script file to put our onEdit function in. First, change the name of our function from myFunction to onEdit. Now all we have to do is call our consolidate function inside of our onEdit function, like this. Save your code. There's no need to click the Run button. Just tab over to your spreadsheet and try it out. Congratulations, you've successfully made your very first script. In the next video, we'll be creating a function that moves a cell we've selected to the top of the list. We'll also need a sidebar user interface with a button that calls the function. We'll be making that too. Please stay tuned. I'm looking forward to creating more useful Google Apps script with you.